Okay, stop what you are doing right now. Because if you are an ARMY and you have not yet found Jimin's Fragment on Spotify, you are missing something that is genuinely going to break your heart in the best possible way. And I mean that, because what Jimin said about Swim, the lead single off BTS's brand new album Erarang, is not what any of us expected. It is raw. It is personal. It is the kind of thing that makes you press pause, sit back, and just stare at the ceiling for a moment because you need a second to process what you just heard. And if you already found it, you already know exactly what I am talking about. This video is for everyone, for the ARMYs who found it and need someone to talk about it with, and for the ARMYs who haven't yet and need to know why they need to drop everything and go find it right now. Let me set the stage for you. Because this did not just come out of nowhere. BTS announced something called Decoding Erarang on March 13th, 2026, just days before their album Erarang was set to drop on March 20th. The concept was a massive in-app Easter egg hunt on Spotify. Not a game, not a playlist, an actual hunt. Across the entire Spotify app, all 7 members, RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V and Jungkook, each personally chose a hiding spot somewhere inside the platform and buried a fragment there. A small digital piece of a wax cylinder. And when you find that fragment, it unlocks something extraordinary, a never-before-released audio message from that member recorded specifically for this campaign, in which they open up about their personal connection to the lead single Swim. Now think about that for a second. 7 men, 7 hiding spots, 7 voice messages, all centered around one song. This is not a coincidence. This is intentional. This is BTS saying, we want you to work for this. We want you to search. We want to recreate the feeling of discovering something precious, something hidden, something that was placed there just for you. And in the context of a song called Swim, which is built around the metaphor of moving forward, even when the current is pulling you under, that feels like the most perfectly designed campaign in recent memory. But here is the thing about Jimin's Fragment specifically. Here is why the ARMY internet practically set itself on fire when his message dropped. Out of all 7 members, Jimin's voice message hit different. And the reason it hit different comes down to who Jimin is and what the past few years have actually meant for him. Think about everything that happened. The hiatus, the enlistment, the years of silence where we did not hear from them as a group. For a fan base that grew up with BTS, that watched these 7 men become the biggest act on the planet, that was there for every comeback, every Billboard achievement, every sold-out stadium show, those years of absence were not just quiet. They were heavy. ARMY poured their energy into solo work, into supporting each member individually. But there was always this undercurrent of, when do we get them back? When do we get all 7 together again? When do we get to hear them talk about making music together? Jimin's voice message answered that question in a way that nobody was fully prepared for. In his Fragment recording, Jimin spoke about Swim not as a pop song, not as a lead single designed for radio play, even though it is absolutely that, but as a document of survival. He described the years away as something that could have easily become a permanent disconnection. He said that distance, physical and emotional, was real. That time changed people. That coming back to the studio together was not as simple as walking back through a door. It required something more deliberate, something more intentional. He described Swim as the group choosing to get back in the water, not because the water was calm, not because the waves had stopped, but because staying on the shore was not an option for them anymore. And here is where it gets deeply personal. Jimin talked about his relationship with his voice during the period away. And anyone who has followed Jimin's career closely, not casually, but closely, knows exactly why that statement carries the weight that it does. This is a man who has spent years navigating the tension between technical vocal perfection and emotional authenticity. A man who once admitted to feeling like he was always reaching for something just slightly out of his grasp. Who poured himself into Face, his solo album, with an intensity that left ARMY floored. Who recorded The Haunting, soul-splitting like crazy, and sent it to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the first Korean solo artist to ever do that. A man who, during the enlistment period, did not let himself go silent even in silence. He kept creating, kept studying, kept pushing. So when Jimin says in his Spotify voice message that Swim gave him back something he was afraid he might have lost, that stops you cold. Because you understand, if you have been paying attention, exactly what that something is. It is not just a singing voice. It is the ability to be fully present inside music. The ability to not just perform a song, but to live inside it while it is happening. To let it mean something in the moment of its creation. And during the years apart, Jimin was honest enough to admit that he was not sure that feeling would still be waiting for him when they came back together. But here's the part that really sent ARMY over the edge. He did not just talk about himself. He talked about the 7 of them as a unit. He described a specific recording session for Swim, a moment in the studio that he said he will never forget, where all 7 of them were in the room together and something shifted. Something unlocked. He said it felt like the first time they had truly heard each other in years. Not just heard each other's voices, but heard each other. The way you hear someone when you have been apart long enough to understand what their presence actually means to you. He said that Swim, at its core, is about that moment. About choosing to move forward together, even when forward is uncertain. About trusting the people next to you in the water, even when you cannot see where you are going. Now pause, read that back, and then consider that this man recorded this message knowing that ARMY was going to find it, knowing that it was going to be the key that unlocked his contribution to decoding Ararang. He could have kept it light. He could have given the kind of polished, promotional answer that artists give when they talk about their music in press contexts. He could have said something warm and gracious and ultimately safe. Instead, he chose this. He chose to be vulnerable in a Spotify Easter egg of all places. Because that is Jimin. That has always been Jimin. The person who finds the unexpected venue and fills it with something real. And what makes this even more fascinating in the context of the broader Decoding Ararang campaign is the historical layer baked into the entire concept. BTS drew this campaign from a true story. 7 young Koreans who voyaged to the United States in 1896 and recorded the first known audio of the Korean language in Washington, D.C. on a wax cylinder. A fragile, physical object. A record of voices that could have been lost forever. The 7 fragments in the Spotify campaign are meant to echo those 7 wax cylinder recordings, fragments of something precious that, when assembled, create a complete picture. Think about that in relation to what Jimin said. Here is a man talking about finding his voice again, about reassembling something that could have fragmented during the years apart, about putting the pieces back together, and the campaign itself is literally about collecting fragments and reassembling them. The metaphor is doing so much work here that it almost feels unfair. It is the kind of layered storytelling that BTS has always been extraordinary at, but in this comeback it feels even more intentional, even more earned. Now let us talk about what Swim actually sounds like, because Jimin's message lands differently once you hear the song. Swim is not what you might expect from a BTS lead single in 2026. It is not a stadium-sized anthem designed to dominate every chart simultaneously, even though it absolutely will dominate every chart simultaneously. It is something more intimate than that. Produced with Ryan Tedder, the One Republic frontman, whose fingerprints are on some of the most emotionally effective pop records of the last 2 decades, Swim has this quality of controlled release. Like a breath being held for a very long time and then finally, carefully let go. The production breathes. It does not crash over you all at once. It starts restrained and then expands. Gradually, the way actual swimming feels. That moment when you stop fighting the water and start moving with it. Suga talked in his own Decoding Ararang fragment about the drums in Swim, about how they anchor the track, give it a groove that feels both grounded and propulsive. And he is right. The rhythm section of Swim is doing something really specific. It refuses to let the song feel defeated even when the lyrics are sitting with difficulty. The beat keeps moving. It does not allow the emotional weight of the words to become stagnation. And then there are the vocals. Jimin's vocal performance on Swim is the kind of thing that only makes complete sense after you hear his Spotify voice message. Because knowing what he shared, knowing that the song was his re-entry into feeling fully present inside music, you listen to him on this track differently. There is a quality in his voice on Swim that is hard to name but unmistakable once you hear it. Something unlocked. Something that was not in his solo material, as extraordinary as Face and his subsequent work were. A specific kind of ease that comes not from things being easy but from having gone through the hard thing and come out the other side still standing. That is what Jimin gave ARMY through his Spotify fragment. Not just a behind-the-scenes story, not just promotional content, a key to hearing the song the way he intended it to be heard. And ARMY noticed. Within hours of Jimin's Fragment going live, the response across social media was unlike anything that has happened in the decoding Ararang campaign up to that point. Screenshots of people who found his Fragment flooded every platform. Voice message reaction videos started appearing on TikTok and YouTube within minutes. The phrase, "Jimin said what?" trended globally. Fan edits of his words, overlaid on clips from the Swim music video teaser, accumulated millions of views in under 24 hours. Because ARMY knows. ARMY always knows when something is real versus when something is performed for an audience. And Jimin's Fragment was real in a way that hit different from anything that has come out of this comeback cycle so far. And this comeback cycle has already given us so much. The Netflix live concert at Gwangwon Square scheduled for March 21st. The documentary BTS, The Return dropping March 27th. A world tour announced with 65 shows including more than 30 dates in North America alone. This is not a comeback. This is a reclamation. And Jimin's Spotify message was the moment the emotional core of that reclamation was most clearly articulated. And that reaction tells you something important about where BTS stands in 2026. Not just commercially, not just culturally, but emotionally. There is a generation of fans who grew up with this group, who were in middle school when DNA dropped, who were in high school during the Dynamite era, who were in college or entering their 20s during the enlistment years. These are not casual listeners. These are people for whom BTS has been a genuine companion through the actual architecture of their lives. And when Jimin speaks in that Spotify Fragment about fear and reconnection and the choice to get back in the water, he is speaking directly to that experience. He is acknowledging that both sides of this relationship were affected by the years apart, that it was not just ARMY waiting, that BTS was doing their own waiting too, their own wondering, their own hoping that when they came back, the thing that made them BTS would still be there. It was. It absolutely was. And Swim is the proof. But Jimin's Fragment is the explanation. It is the backstory that makes the song make complete sense on a human level, not just a musical one. It is the reason that listening to Swim feels like reunion, because Jimin told us, in a voice message hidden inside a Spotify Easter egg, that it is. That he experienced it as reunion. That the studio session where they recorded it was where he finally stopped being afraid. That is not promotional content. That is testimony. And ARMY felt every single word of it. But here's the thing that keeps coming back to me as I sit with everything Jimin said. The bravery of it. Not the artistic bravery, though that is absolutely present, but the relational bravery. The willingness to stand in front of ARMY and say, "The years apart changed me. Coming back was not simple, and I was scared." Because Jimin does not have to say that. He has already earned everything. He already has the Billboard Hot 100 record. He already has the Dior partnership, the Paris Fashion Week appearance that generated $33.8 million in media impact value, the highest ever recorded for a K-pop artist at any major fashion week. He is, by any objective metric, untouchable. And still he chose to be touchable. He chose to find a fragment hiding spot inside Spotify, record a voice message that let people see the cracks in him, and trust that ARMY would hold those cracks with care. Which we will. Which we always do. If you have not found Jimin's Fragment yet, here is what you need to do. Update your Spotify app to the latest version. Make sure you are logged into a premium account. Open the search bar and type BTS decoding Ararang. The campaign is live and the fragments are out there. Each member hid their piece in a unique location within the spaces where BTS exists on Spotify. Scroll deep, interact with everything you see, and keep going. When you find Jimin's Fragment, tap it. It will unlock, and then you will hear his voice. And you will understand why the entire ARMY internet is still processing it right now. 7 fragments, 7 voices, 1 wax cylinder being reassembled across the digital world in real time. And when all 7 pieces come together, the ultimate Ararang Easter egg waits. A piece of the Swim lyrics, hidden exclusively on Spotify, accessible only to the people who were willing to search. That is BTS in 2026. Not just releasing a comeback album, building a treasure hunt, encoding history into an Easter egg, asking ARMY to earn the most personal version of the music, and then, through Jimin, reminding us all exactly why we are here, why we have always been here, why none of us were ever going to stop searching. Swim drops March 20th. The concert streams on Netflix March 21st. And right now, Somewhere inside your Spotify app, there are still fragments waiting to be found. One of them has Jimin's voice, and what he says will shock you. Not because it is scandalous, not because it is dramatic, but because it is honest. Completely and disarmingly and beautifully honest. In a world full of carefully managed pop star messaging, Jimin chose to tell the truth inside a wax cylinder fragment on a music streaming app. And somehow that tells you everything you need to know about why ParkJimin is who he is. And why Arirang is going to be one of the most important records BTS has ever made. Go find the fragment. You will not regret it.